So, have you seen Hamilton the Musical? Well, everyone I know who's seen it loves it. They can't seem to gather enough adjectives to describe their experience. You know, I love the backstory of the creation of the Broadway musical. Lin-Manuel Miranda, the writer, was going on vacation and wanted a fat book to read. And he chose Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. Lin said he was inspired by Hamilton's story because it spoke to him personally, as it reminded him of his own father, who, like Hamilton, was an immigrant from the Caribbean who made something of himself in New York. And because of this personal connection, Miranda envisioned retelling Hamilton's story in a modern hip-hop fashion. Well, Lin wrote a song called Alexander Hamilton, performed it for President Obama in 2009, and it went viral from there. And that's when Lin realized he had something. What began as vacation reading material was converted into a song and is now a full-blown, award-winning Broadway musical. Now, that's quite a return on investment for the price of a book. Lin-Manuel Miranda tells the story of the making of Hamilton in a PBS special. The cast includes African Americans who play some of the founding fathers who, of course, were white. And what struck me about these talented young actors was their mature view of America's founding fathers. You know, too many today look at the founders through extremist lenses. One extreme sees them as nothing but evil slaveholders and therefore dismiss everything they ever did and said. And the other extreme worships them as the final authorities in all matters of political faith and practice, while ignoring or excusing their faults. But the Hamilton cast found a balanced center. They recognized that men like Washington and Jefferson were slaveholders, an awful fact. Yet, instead of completely writing Washington and Jefferson off, they recognized the founders were men of their times, they respected the good that they did, while at the same time acknowledging the bad. One cast member used this illustration. He says he hates misogyny and gay bashing, while some of his favorite rap artists engage in these activities. However, he says this doesn't erase the contributions these artists made to the art itself. And then he applied that same philosophy to the founders. That's a great attitude. They didn't go to extremes. Kudos. Ariana Afsar plays Hamilton's wife in the Chicago cast, and she said on a TV interview that Hamilton is revolutionary in teaching history. The Tonight Show host Jimmy Fallon admits he knew nothing of Hamilton before this play, and he said it's the greatest thing he's ever seen. And Oscar Eustis, the artistic director of the Public Theater in New York City, unapologetically compares the writer of Hamilton to Shakespeare, saying Lin in Hamilton is doing exactly what Shakespeare did in his history plays. He's taking the voice of the common people, elevating it to poetry. In Shakespeare's case, iambic pentameter. In Lin's case, rap, rhyme, hip-hop, R&B, and by elevating it to poetry, ennobling the people themselves. He's bringing out what is noble about the common tongue, and that nobody has done effectively as Lin since Shakespeare. Now that is quite a statement. Lin is doing for us what Shakespeare did for the English people. So, who was the real Alexander Hamilton? Hamilton was an American by adoption, a self-made man who was born out of wedlock, which was a crime that carried a horrible stigmatism in his day. He was deserted by a useless father, orphaned by 13, and then, with the help of friends and family, made it to New York. And the rest, as they say, is history. But let's give a little more detail. Hamilton was born on January 11, 1757 in Nevis, an island of the West Indies, to a Scotchman dad and a Huguenot mom. His father abandoned them when Hamilton was 11, and a year later, his mother died. After this, he went to work as a clerk where he began developing his economic skills, and one day a horrible storm came through the island, leaving death and destruction in its wake. Well, young Hamilton wrote about the event, and the story was so well written, it was published, receiving raving reviews. And then friends, recognizing his potential, sent him to a school in Elizabethtown, New Jersey at the age of 15. And after only 1 year, he was admitted into King's College in New York City. And by the time he was 17, Hamilton was using the eloquence of his pen to encourage his countrymen in their resistance of the British. And during the war, he served as captain of an artillery company, winning great distinction. And then in 1777, he met George Washington, became his chief of staff at the age of 20, and this relationship sealed his immortal place in American history. After the war, Hamilton studied law, became a member of Congress, took part in the Constitutional Convention, and at the age of 32, he served as the Secretary of the Treasury. It was as Secretary of the Treasury that Hamilton put the new government on solid footing. Hamilton wanted to establish the authority and credit of the new government, and he proposed to do it by establishing a national bank and making the new government assume the state's war debt, thereby establishing a federal line of credit. James Madison and Thomas Jefferson didn't like Hamilton's idea because their state of Virginia paid off most of its debt. So Washington told the three to compromise, and they did. The three men struck a deal where Hamilton got the debt in exchange for moving the federal capital to the South. Hamilton served his country in other ways until he was shot and killed by Aaron Burr in a duel in 1804. A sad end. The Hamilton play is a really good thing. It gets Americans thinking about the founders again. You know, there will always be critics who question accuracy as if their version of history is the only right one, and their manner of presenting it is the only right one. Lin-Manuel Miranda did his homework. Hamilton is well-researched, and it has generated a fresh interest in history. Young people who didn't care about history are now investigating it because of this musical. Hamilton has gotten conversations started. And as a person myself who loves history, I think this is awesome. But the issue is now how we engage in conversation. This is where learning about Hamilton can be of practical value. Hamilton's views caused controversy in his day and in ours. Those for smaller government dislike Hamilton. Those for stronger government love him. But the question is, can the two sides come together? Can they have a civil conversation? Hamilton's life teaches us how to have civil discussion, minus the life-ending duels, of course. Now, here are examples from Hamilton's own life. During the Constitutional Convention, Hamilton gave a speech in which he said he wanted America to set up a British-style government with a president serving for life, like a monarch. James Madison said the speech was applauded by all, but approved of by no one. In other words, Hamilton was well respected even though the people didn't agree with him. Hamilton didn't get his way in the convention. However, he still wanted his name on the document, even though technically his signature didn't count, because the rules of the convention stated that there had to be at least 2 representatives from each state in the city of Philadelphia for its vote to count. And the New York reps went home because they didn't approve of the Constitution, leaving Hamilton alone. But Hamilton, even though his views weren't represented in the Constitution, asked that his name be on the document because he wanted to be part of the team. He accepted the judgment of others and wanted to cooperate for the good of the country. And then, after the convention, Hamilton went out and sold the convention's product. As a matter of fact, he was probably its greatest salesman. He wrote many of the Federalist Papers in defense of the Constitution, which influenced its ratification. And then, once the Constitution went into effect, Hamilton worked tirelessly to get the new federal government on its feet. Major William Pierce was a delegate from Georgia at the Constitutional Convention, and this is what he wrote about Hamilton. The heart and head sympathize in approving him. Hamilton requires time to think. He inquires into every part of his subject with the searchings of philosophy. And when he comes forward, he comes highly charged with interesting matter. There is no skimming over the surface of a subject with him. He must sink to the bottom to see what foundation it rests on. His manners are sometimes with a degree of vanity that is highly disagreeable. It almost seems that Mr. Pierce had to throw in a little bit of a negativity there after all that great praise. Hamilton did have an aura of arrogance about him, but then again, we all have our faults, don't we? But the rest of Pierce's description of Hamilton is just awesome. Those are qualities we should all strive for. Imagine if we thought as deeply as Hamilton did before we spoke. But even then, after reflection and study, our manner of debate needs to be civilized. That's because even after reflection and study, our opinions still may be wrong, or at the very least need revising. Perfection of ideas only comes through scrutiny and conversation. Hamilton wrote in the First Federalist paper about how we should engage in debate. He pointed out that there are good men on both sides of essential issues, and this should teach us to be moderate, honest, kind, and sincere when expressing our opinions, even if we are convinced we are right. Too often we characterize those who oppose us as enemies. Now, this shouldn't be. Hamilton said, in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. And Hamilton said this with regards to expressing his own convictions. I frankly acknowledge to you my convictions, and I will freely lay before you the reasons on which they are founded. My arguments will be open to all, and may be judged of by all. They shall at least be offered in a spirit which will not disgrace the cause of truth. That's the spirit. Hamilton the Musical can contribute to bringing out these qualities in all of us, and we'd be the better off because of it.